All right. What's up, y'all? Welcome to Lawns Across America, episode 34. Figure I hit you up today with a little salsa. This always puts me in a good mood, good summer music. Reminds me of the times I go down to Miami. I love Miami for about 6 hours. That's about all I can handle of it, but all right, let's jump into this one today. So I got a lot to go over today, and taking some of your questions that came in on the LCN Tips line, 833 LCN Tips, as well as some that came in via email and such this week. So we'll go over those. A lot of people ask me, hey, where can I email you? Listen, we get hundreds of emails, so I don't want to put that out as a thing. These are questions that come in. We see so many of the same or similar questions come in from customers, and so those are the ones I'll try to answer on here. But if you have a question that you specifically want to ask, please send that in on the LCN Tips line. Give me a call there at 833 LCN Tips. Now, one of the things that's coming in this week a lot, because the weather continues to be tough across the north of the country. By the way, warm season lawns, we love this warm weather. I mean, this is great for us. Down here in Florida, finally we started getting some of the rain we deserve. And in fact, we've had rain every day now over by here in a Bradenton, Florida area, just outside of Tampa, over St. Petersburg area by there. I'm just north of the Manatee River there. And we're supposed to be getting rain every afternoon now. This is our rainy season. Rains every day between 1 and 3 usually, and it'll rain for about 20 minutes, and it rains really hard. And we are in that zone. In fact, yesterday it rained several times during the day. And I always tell people on Facebook, I'm like, we need the rain. And I will always say that because we have been pretty dry this year. But either way, finally into our zone where we need to be, and the lawns are really responding around here, and that's good to see. So my Florida friends, this is what you've been waiting on. I think some of you up north have been getting some rain too, which is a nice reprieve from the heat, but I also think you're still getting the heat. And then in general, some people they're just facing these kind of summertime blues, I guess, where you worked hard. This is mostly cool season, folks. You worked hard all spring. You're kind of tired, and the summertime, the lawn doesn't respond maybe the way that it was. Some things are cropping up that you didn't expect. This has been a tough year anyway, and some of you are getting discouraged. So with that, I want to throw this out there. And by the way, I realized too, as I started listening and looking back through these podcasts, that I tend to talk to those of you that are struggling the most, and I don't always want to do that. I'll just throw this out. I like to share personal things with you all. And I was trained to be a Baptist preacher, and I said, that kind of preacher, And in that, I noticed over the years, I've been going to Baptist churches since 9 months before I was born, and I've noticed that during all of these years, it seems the preachers always talk to the negative. In fact, every message will always be like, I know you're hurting, and I know your finances are bad, and I know that you're sick, and every message is like that. And I would look around sometimes and feel guilty because my life wasn't in shambles or it wasn't going bad. I don't know. Am I the only one that's like that? I was like, man, what's wrong with me that my life isn't in shambles? I'm not financially hurting, and I'm not sick. What's wrong with me? Or what's coming? Is there something negative coming because this is all you talk about? Sorry. It's just one of those things, what's wrong with prosperity? I don't know. But long and the short of it is, I don't want to be the one to always talk to you guys that aren't doing well, because I know there's a ton of you out there that you're like, man, my lawn looks great, bruh. So I do need to talk, though, this week one more time to the struggling folks. And I guess if you're somebody that's not struggling, you shouldn't feel guilty about it. What you should do is look back and, number one, realize that you've worked really hard to get yourself to where you are, and you deserve the success that you have. And number two, as I mentioned in a podcast, I think 2 weeks ago, that anyone that's worked very hard has worked hard to put themselves in a position to receive luck. And in some cases, if you're sitting through those 95-degree temperatures and a lot of humidity or whatever it is, and you don't have the disease problems and you don't have the stress in your lawn, realize that you worked so hard that you also put yourself in a position to receive luck or good fortune. Nothing wrong with that at all. Karma, you maybe want to call it. Blessings, whatever it is. So sit back and count those blessings and be happy for it. But for those of you that are struggling, I think it's a lot of folks that are maybe new. We've really gotten a lot of new folks in the community this year, and that's going to happen every year. And that's what I'm here for. And so I do need to encourage some of you guys too. And I realized that when you're first starting out with the lawn, it can be difficult. This is cool season and warm season, really. Even though warm season, you should be making the biggest gains right now. You should be having some gains. But cool season, I know that you're struggling after some gains, or some of you that may have just started even like 10 minutes ago, you're definitely struggling. So I want you to realize that things get easier as you go on. I'm going to give you an analogy. Usually I put these analogies to relationships, but I think I'm going to put the analogy this week to business, building a business, because I think that's something that'll interest a lot of you too. But I will say that as you're working on your lawn, it gets easier over time. Number one, because the strength of your lawn improves. But number two, your strength as a lawn farmer, as a suburban farmer, your skill level improves as well. And that's the same in business. When you start a business or you start working in business, it can be difficult at first. Some of you might have trouble with maybe the accounting side of things or inventory or things like that. Other things you may have challenges with are managing people. I bet you that's one of the biggest things that people have challenge with in business is managing people. You hear about it all the time. People like to say, well, millennials are this and millennials are that. What they're actually saying is when they say that millennials are terrible employees or whatever words they want to use, they're not actually downing the millennials. They're downing themselves. They're saying, I don't have the skill to manage people. It's like a self-confession is what it is. So maybe those are the things you struggle with. But you'll find that when you've been in business for a long time, and I've been working in different businesses now since the 90s, I don't really have trouble managing employees. In fact, I'm a terrible manager of employees now because I'm so hands-off. But that's a whole nother thing. That might be what you call burnout. But I'm just saying your skills in business get better over time. You learn how to overcome the challenges of running a business, whether it's employees, staffing, accounting, inventory, whatever all those things are. Just market trends. If you're, man, I used to work with guys in the auto business. Holy cow. You want to talk about some guys that are reactionary. Not all of them, but man, especially the sons of auto dealers. Just, that's a bad place to be working with. Reactionary people, emotionally reactionary. But as you're in the business a long time, you start to realize what trends are happening. You can spot the trends ahead of time and you can be proactive. And that's how it works with the lawn. It takes a little bit of time. But right now, a lot of you are reactionary. The thing is, it's also difficult, though, when you're just starting out and then you have a really rough time on top of it. So this is a rough summer. This is not a good summer for cool season lawns. It's not. We've seen extremes that we haven't seen in several years. And so even those of you that may have been tending your lawn for a couple years and doing well, this is the first time you've seen adversity. Just imagine folks that were in business when there was the 2008, 2009 financial crisis. Some people's business might have been running good for 3 or 4 years. They think they're doing well. And then all of a sudden, bam, there's a financial crisis. And they're like, whoa, and it can really throw you off your game. And a lot of you are seeing that this year with your lawns as well. Things may have been progressing well, but it's your first year or you've been doing it a couple years, but you've never faced adversity in a summer like this. Well, this is a learning experience, and you're going to be better for it in the future. So those are just some things to think about, that even though you're going through a tough time right now, this is a long game. Just like starting a business, nobody starts a business to run it for 1 or 2 years. You start it because this is going to be your life. Typically, if you're an entrepreneurial type person, you're doing this because, hey, this is what I want to do with my life. And so, yeah, it's tough right now. And in fact, going back to the entrepreneur idea, it's super fun and exciting in the beginning when you first start a business as an entrepreneur. And then over time, it can get a little mundane. You got to keep it exciting. You got to keep making good decisions. And then you hit these times where it's tough. But after you do it for 10, 15, 20 years, nothing surprises you anymore. And you can really start to know how to hedge against these challenges. So all of that to say, don't be discouraged. You're going to hear there's some discouraging questions this week, but at the end of the day, just keep mowing. That's really what I'm going to tell you to do. Just keep sticking with the basics, mowing and watering. And that's what I wanted to go back to, too. A lot of the things that I tell you guys, I think sometimes it stresses you out, but realize that what I tell you, it's not gospel. It's not, cut and dry, black and white. The world isn't that way. There's always gray area in everything. And I realize the way the world operates today, it's black or it's white. You're right or you're wrong. You're on this side or that side. But that's wrong when it comes to most things in life. There's a lot of gray area. And the lawn has a lot of gray area, too. For example, if I tell you some best practices for business, I would say, for example, don't go into debt. That'd be a great best practice for business. Don't go into debt. In my company, we bootstrap everything, which means we pay for everything we do from our own earnings. We don't have outstanding debt. We haven't taken loans or VC money or anything like that. We're bootstrapping the company. And I would tell you that that's a good way to run a business, because if you don't have a bunch of stress from debt, you're able to, in my opinion, you're able to really make good strides for your business. You're able to do the right things at the right time. Whereas when you're strapped with debt, you might have to make decisions that you don't want to have to make, but the debt requires you to make those decisions, if that makes sense. So I would say that's a best practice. But does that mean that's the only way to run a business? No. There are tons of people that will go into debt when they're starting a business because they know that they've got a good idea. They can make a capital investment in something and they know it will pay off. For example, if you're selling an item and you realize that you might have to go into debt a few $100,000 to buy several, 100,000 of that unit ahead of time to get a better price, knowing they'll sell later. You see, that's okay then to go in debt in that way. But I wouldn't do that. I just give you a best practice. Don't go into debt in your business. But if you do it and you take that chance, it's up to you to take that risk. And that's the same thing with the lawn. I might give you some best practices and say, for example, it's best to mow your lawn twice a week. Definitely mow your lawn every 3 days. That's good for it. Water your lawn 1/2 inch every other day, whatever it is. Those are best practices. Don't water your lawn at night. That's another best practice. But does that mean that you shouldn't try those things if you have to? For example, watering the lawn at night. The reason we tell you not to water the lawn at night is because what can happen is, especially if humidity is high, the lawn can sit there wet all night, and it can help the disease triangle to come together, and it can help disease to take a foothold because the lawn is wet all night when the temperatures are a little bit lower. But what if you can't water during the day? What if you work a strange shift and the only time you can water at night? Well, then I would tell you that you need to make a decision and take the risk, because it's better to water your lawn at night than to not water it at all. See the gray area there? I just gave you a best practice, but it's not a hard and fast rule, because not watering at all is really the worst case scenario. So you have to be able to work within the parameters and realize that I'm just giving you best practices. And that's all they are. And it's up to you to raise your kids the way that you were taught, or to run your business the way that you were taught, or the way that you've learned, or what you've learned from experience. I don't know, I brought the kids up. I think that was one of the other analogies I was going to use, like how to discipline your kids. But we won't go there. I think you're getting the idea, right? I guess we could use the analogy of raising kids. Like I would tell you as a best practice, it's a good idea to discipline your kids. Like if your kid lies to you, children lie. You don't have to teach them to lie. They just do. Did you steal those cookies, Johnny? No. Well, they're lying, right? Well, you should discipline your kid. Now, how you discipline them is up to you. I could never tell you how to discipline your kids, but I would say it's a good idea. It's a best practice that you don't let your kids just get away with lying to you. I don't think anybody would disagree with that, right? So that's the type of thing. But there's gray area in how you do that and how you go about that. You see? And by the way, that's what makes the world so wonderful. So think about those things. Don't stress yourself out, but keep doing the right things. Back to the lawn, the mowing twice a week. Yeah, I tell you to mow twice a week, but I know that most of you aren't going to be able to do that. Those of us on YouTube, we have a luxury. This is what we do for a living, many of us, so we can mow twice a week because it's our living. Some of you might look at that and say, well, I can't do that. Well, okay, that's just how I've shaped my life. You shape your life around your abilities, around your availability of time. What I want to do, though, is push you for perfection and hope that you fail at perfection rather than succeed at mediocrity. I've used this before. If I tell you that the standard is to mow twice a week, mow twice a week, mow twice a week, I know that 90% of you will fail at that and you'll mow once a week. But I would rather you do that than for me to go mow once a week and you end up mowing twice a month. See? So I'm going to push you for the perfect example of mowing twice a week, knowing you'll probably end up mowing once a week, rather than pushing you, oh yeah, just mow once a week and then you end up mowing every 2 weeks. Does that make sense? I'd rather you fail at perfection than succeed at mediocrity. That's another way that I kind of try to teach here and get you guys to go through. So either way, the thing I want you to know is when it does get bad and things do seem rough, don't panic. This season will pass. No doubt about it. The fall will come. Now, again, warm season lawns, we don't want this season to pass yet. We're making our best strides right now. But if you're in cool season and you're struggling and things aren't looking good, don't worry. Everything gets reset in the fall real easy. It's easy to take a cool season lawn in the fall and take it right back up to beautiful within like 6 weeks. No jokes. Hang here with me. I'll show you how to do it. It is not hard. I don't care how bad your lawn gets this summer. I don't care how much it gets burnt down to the ground. You can redo it in the fall and have it looking beautiful in 6 weeks. Like nothing. Cool season lawns are super easy to grow. I don't mean to to minimize that. It's a tough year right now, but for the most part, cool season lawns are much easier to grow than warm season. Just mark that down. Ask anybody that's moved from up north to down here, and they will tell you it's much more difficult down here. Much more. It's a different strategy, though. Totally different. I try to talk to both of y'all. But at the end of the day, just go back to mowing. That's all you got to do. Mowing and watering. Even if the lawn is brown, just water it once every 7 to 10 days. Give it a half inch of water just to keep the crowns alive. And whenever it needs to be mowed, get out and mow it. Spot spray weeds here and there. That's the basics in the summer if you can't keep up with things or things get a little tough. All right, now with that, I'm going to go into a subject that I probably didn't want to cover. Oh, before we do that, I just want to say, if you want the podcast broken down into segments, I started a new channel. It's called LC Lawn Care Nut Just the Tips, or Lawn Care Nut Just Lawn Tips. I'll link it if you're on YouTube or whatever, but just search Lawn Care Nut Just Lawn Tips. Lawn Care Nut Just the Tips. And the reason I did that is because the way YouTube's algorithm works is it rewards you for certain view lengths and certain click-throughs. There's all these, I hate this part of it, but it is what it is. And when I put on a 2-hour podcast and then all of a sudden a bunch of 5 or 10 or 15-minute segments come out, it throws that off. And the algorithm doesn't like that. So what I've decided to do is make that other channel only about the tips and only about the segments. And I also realize that there's some of you that don't care about the segments and only want the long podcasts, and then there's some of you that want only the segments. So that'll allow me to do that. You could subscribe to either one you want. So just search Lawn Care Nut Just Lawn Tips. I'll link it on YouTube here somewhere for you. But that's where I'm putting the podcast segments, as well as some of my other videos on the regular Lawn Care Nut channel that they have segments in them too that I can break out. So I'll put some of those on there too and make that a fun little channel. So that is that. Other thing is, we do have some Yard Mastery hats. If you're on YouTube, you'll see that I'm wearing one of the Yard Mastery hats. I had a lot of people ask about these. So those are available now. We have a limited quantity that we ordered just to start with. I have another order that I just put in. I only ordered a few to start with because I just wanted to make sure the quality was good, which these are awesome. We really like these. We're revamping all the merch, and I wanted to see what they looked like. Now, these are flat build hats. People are pretty passionate about flat bill versus not flat bill and all of that. Let me just explain something to y'all, and you all that are my age will remember this. The idea of a curved bill hat was something you created when I was a kid. When you played Little League Baseball, I'm talking in the 80s, and you got your baseball hat, the first thing you did was bend it. We used to get a rubber band, and we would bend the brim, right, and put a rubber band around it, similar to how you broke in your baseball glove. You'd do the same, and you'd always be bending your hat. We'd be sitting in the dugout, always bending our hats. And you obviously would try to get the biggest bend you could. You know, you wanted to have that, and then you'd have your hair in the front hanging down because it was the 80s. And then I had some curly locks out the back from my mullet. It's so funny, baseball players, I think today still like the mullet. But either way, we bent our own hats, and so just want to let you know, just because it's a flat bill doesn't mean you can't bend it. Now, we ordered some curved bills, but I wanted to just say something real quick. The thing about a flat bill hat is it has a higher crown. In other words, the middle and the top of the hat sticks up higher naturally. And so when you do your own bend, you can, number one, you can control the slope of the bend, which I don't like a ton of bend nowadays because I like to have a wider brim that's going to keep the sun out of my face, for number one. But number two is I like a little bit of a bend, but then I like that higher crown. I like the hat to stick up high on my head. Where when you buy one that's pre-bent, they have what's called a mid-crown. And I didn't necessarily know about all this until I started researching hats so much. And I've had hats in the past from Columbia that had a high crown and a slight bend in the brim. And I was like, how do they do that? Because you order like the old Richardson 112 or whatever. That's like the one that everybody has. And it's a nice hat. It has a good bend and all that, but it has a mid crown. It's not high on the top. And I like my hats to sit a little higher on the top. So either way, just something to think about when you do buy mid crown versus high crown, or flat build versus bent build. But we do have both come in, as well as some lawn care nut styles. Right now, they're just Yard Mastery styles just because we just thought we would get those out. But we have a few of those on the site now if you want to check them out on yardmastery.com. And if you see me wearing ones in my videos, those are mostly going to be flat bills that I have done my own custom build bending. Pretty crazy we talk about hats that way, but I don't know, man. I'm pretty well known for my hat game, and so if I can take it up a notch by having custom bent bills that I bend the way I want with high crowns, hey, man. Hoorah. Okay, now we're going to go on to a segment that, again, I was kind of hesitant to cover this. It goes into brown spots in the summer. And again, my warm season friends, I'm sorry, I'm talking mostly to cool season here. Warm season friends, just keep on rolling. Just keep on enjoying the tips. We do have some stuff coming up that will appeal to all of you. Promise you it will. But for right now, cool season, a lot of you guys have brown spots. I've covered on the channel things like dollar spot, Pythium mold, all kinds of things, heat stress. But there's another thing that's showing up. And now listen, let me just say this. You're never going to know really what you have. It's going to be really hard. And it's hard for people online to tell what you have when you just show a picture of your lawn from 40 feet back and it's a bunch of brown spots. It's really difficult to tell. Sometimes you really have to get down in a lawn and put your hands in it and see, are the grass blades standing up, and or are they folded down? Are they coming off easy? There's so many different, what are the shapes of all the brown spots? And even in advanced brown areas, did this brown spot show up yesterday or did it show up 3 weeks ago? What's your watering like? You got to look at the whole site itself, sunny, shady, how the house faces. Is it, north facing, south facing? What do the slopes look like? So water runoff is, what kind of area? There's so many different things to look at to diagnose brown spots. And what can happen is I do a video or I make a podcast on something, and what happens is everybody goes, oh, yep, that's my problem. That's what I got. And I'm throwing down Disease X. And I see that all the time. Like, by the way, if you have dollar spot, Disease X will do nothing for it. You need propiconazole for that. But so I don't want you all to think this is the problem that you have. What I want to do, though, is give you another thing to research on your own and maybe some best practices to look for or some ways to possibly proceed. But don't ever forget that you should definitely look at calling your local county extension office and see if the extension agent will be in the area and come out and help you personally, or if you can take things into them, pictures of up close, far back, different things like that. And even then, you may not be able to diagnose what your problem is. But I just want to give you some idea here of something that I am seeing, and this is verified, this example here. And if you think this could be a problem that you've had that's causing your brown spots, then I'll give you some ways to get through it. And I'm also going to give you some ways to track, because this problem here that I'm going to mention is one that you're going to have to track all the way through next year. So that's why you should get our Yard Mastery app, because even if you don't care about the lawn program that we give you in there, you could use the journal itself and put pictures in the journal. Pictures are going to be so incredibly important to you, especially if this is your challenge, because you'll be able to literally see how your lawn progresses. So I'm talking about a lawn that's had a Poa Annua problem. Now, what is Poa Annua? Poa Annua is annual bluegrass, okay? And in a lawn, it looks a lot like Kentucky bluegrass. In fact, majority of people, including me, if you just look at a lawn that has Poa Annua in it and Kentucky bluegrass in the spring, you're not necessarily going to be able to pick out the Poa Annua. Now, I'm going to put some pictures on the screen here if you're on YouTube, and you'll see we can identify that this one had Poa Annua from the seed heads. Even those look similar to the Kentucky bluegrass seed heads. So if you're on YouTube, I'm going to point you to a Grass Daddy video. By the way, I don't own Grass Daddy's channel. That's an old rumor he started on April Fool's, I don't know, like 45 years ago, that still persists. But he has some of the best videos and graphics on Poa Annua, telling it in the difference in Kentucky bluegrass. But the seed heads I'm showing you in these pictures are for sure Poa Annua. So what Poa Annua is, it's a fall germinating annual, and it germinates in the fall time. You probably won't see much of it, maybe a little bit of it in the fall. It lives over winter, and in the spring, it grows alongside of your Kentucky bluegrass, and your Kentucky bluegrass is growing so vigorous, or your fescue or whatever else is growing so vigorously that it masks it out. Then it forms seed heads, usually not exactly at the same time, though, as your good grass, as your turf grass does, but very similar in time. That's why people can't always tell if they have it. And then as it gets hotter, it drops those seeds. Those seeds are viable. The seed that comes from your Kentucky bluegrass or your turf-type tall fescue is not. It's sterile. But the stuff that comes from the Poa Annua is viable. It drops those seeds, and then when you get to the summer, it dies because it's an annual. It lives 1 year, and the 1 year that it lives is from the late summer, early fall, all the way until the late spring, early summer, or midsummer, and it dies. That's its annual life. Then those seeds sit there all during the summer. And then they regerminate again, or new ones germinate again in the fall, and this starts all over. The problem is in the middle of the summer, like now when you've had 90-degree temperatures, you see all these dead spots in the lawn, and what it can be is that dead Poa Annua. So you're saying they're thinking, my lawn was beautiful, everything was great, I've been watering it right, I have disease control down, everything is good, and all of a sudden, boom, I have these dead spots. That could be dead Poa Annua. Could be. Now, one of the ways that you can tell that it's Poa Annua, if you haven't seen the seeds in the spring, and this is why pictures are so important, is that right now it will be laying flat. So, for example, if you have dollar spot issues in your lawn, it doesn't really lay flat dollar spot. The grass blades will still stick up straight. They're just brownish orangish or straw colored over time. They don't lay down. Grass, when it lays down, is usually dead. If it's still standing up, it's usually not dead. It's just damaged. The crown is still alive. It's still able to support those grass blades even though they're dead, right? So that's one of the ways to tell, and I'm showing you some pictures here. But again, these pictures there's a lot of other things that can kill grass. So, from foot traffic to even too much heat can still kill it. I mean, there's only a certain amount of temperature that grass can handle before it's going to die, even if it has water. So it's not foolproof. I'm just giving you some examples of things to look for. The other thing with Poa Annua is, it won't be a huge all dead spot. There will be some living grass in between there, assuming that you have some good Kentucky bluegrass or rye still intermixed around there. The other thing is, typically, I find it in the middle of lawns where there's a slope because the seeds have washed down there. Not always. So in other words, if you have brown spots that are along edges, a lot of that can be heat stress, where if it's in the middle of the lawn, a lot of that could be dead Poa Annua. But remember, the key is here that this didn't come in, over an amount of time. Literally, when it's Poa Annua, it seems like it dies overnight. But part of this is you're not always as observant, especially if you're working during the day, stuff like that. You're not super observant of it that way. And so it sometimes can seem like these things happened overnight when really they've been there for a while. So you got to always look at your perspective and context. This is why, again, pictures are so important. So that's one of those things where if that is the case, I'm going to give you a strategy. So if you believe that you have Poa Annua, and by the way, what you want to do is next spring, you definitely want to keep an eye out for these little patches that get seed heads all by themselves. If the whole lawn goes to seed, that's probably your good grass. But if you see small patches going to seed, that's probably Poa Annua. And the seed stalks, the seed is a little bit more spread out. It isn't as streamlined. And again, there's pictures. If you search Grass Daddy Poa Annua seed pictures, you'll find his picture. He's got some great photos that'll help you with that. So if you believe that you had Poa Annua, and this is these pictures here are verified as that, if you believe that was the case, then what that means is those dead Poa Annua, they dropped seeds that are going to germinate as soil temperatures fall to 70 degrees heading into the fall time. Now, if you have our app, we'll tell you when that time comes up exactly based on your house or your city, depending how much address information you put in. But that's one of those things. Then what we need to do is, number one, is no more seeding for you. No more seeding. Now, one thing you can do is right now in the middle of the summer is if you want to go in and scrape out all the dead and put in sod, you can do that. You can establish sod in the summer. Just you have to water it a lot. But in a lot of cases, this is only an area that's maybe 250 square feet, if that. Scrape it out and sod it. For some reason, a lot of y'all have this thing against sod. And I don't know why that is. It's like, would you rather have surgery or use medicine to cure a problem? Sometimes surgery is just quicker. Like if you have, this can be a terrible analogy. If you have like a festering open wound on your arm, I mean, you could put Neosporin on it and hope that helps, or you could just have the doctor cut it out and put in a skin graft. I don't think I would want to opt for either one of those, but you get the idea. There's nothing wrong with surgery. Sometimes surgery is necessary. Sometimes you have to cut out a problem. Now, when you go in and cut all this out, the reason you put the sod right on top is because there's going to be some seeds left. People say, well, should I dig it all out? No, because then you got to bring in topsoil, and that's a whole nother issue. Do not bring topsoil into your lawn. Don't do it, please. I don't care if you've seen it done in other places. Don't do it. I will tell you that is a black and white thing. Don't bring in topsoil into your lawn. You never know what's in it. Just don't. You bring in problems. But I guess that is a black and white rule. Again, you can take the risk if you want. But back to it. Don't try to dig it all out. Just scrape off the dead stuff, resod. That will help blot out the sun. The reason that you're going to sod now in July is it takes about 30 to 35 days for the sod to get established, for then you to be able to apply dithiopyr or prodiamine which is a pre-emergent that will stop the annual bluegrass from germinating as temperatures fall to 70. So in a lot of cases, depending where you live, Northwest Indiana over by there, somewhere up in that area over by there, you're gonna have soil temperatures fall into 70 sometime around the first week of September. So here we are at the end of July. The label on prodiamine and dithiopyr says that you can apply it after 2 mowings, I believe. Well, if you put sod down right now at the end of July, early August, you will have mowed it twice by the time you get to the first week of September, and then you can throw down your dithiopyr or prodiamine. So that's one thing. Now, you don't have to seed, though. Remember, if you have some good grass, you don't have to sod, though. Remember, if you have some good grass blotted in and out of there, it will thicken up in the fall, just like in the springtime. If you go back to my old church project, remember there, I showed you how nasty that lawn was. It was hardly any grass there. And then after 6 weeks, boom, it was beautiful. And that's just from bombing it with fertilizer. And you can do the same exact thing in the fall that you did in the spring. It's another one of those growth periods that works. So if you have 30% good grass there, don't seed. And if you don't want to sod, you don't have to sod. Just limp things along right now. Maybe some crabgrass might show up in and amongst these dead areas because crabgrass is opportunistic. So spray that out with some quinclorac, or you can use tenacity if it's getting away from you and it's getting nasty. Keep the crabgrass out. But when you get to the fall, if you've had Poa Annua and you suspect that that's what's caused these spots, these dead areas in your lawn, then you go to a complete no seeding, no aeration strategy. You put down dithiopyr or prodiamine. The reason I keep mentioning both is prodiamine has a yearly maximum, and a lot of you have used that up in the spring. So just go to dithiopyr. We have it both on the website, and dithiopyr is back in stock now, not prodiamine yet, but dithiopyr is there if you want it. They're going to work about the same, so it's not a big deal. They're the same price. Put the dithiopyr down as a pre-emergent. It will stop the annual bluegrass from germinating, and it works very well. And then from there, you can push the lawn with fertilizer. Push, push, push. Hammer it. Whatever you want to use. Carbonex is obviously what I would recommend in the fall there to hammer that lawn. You got all of the fall. After you're going to come out of this tough summer that's just been horrible, go back to the fall now and hammer with fertilizer. Just nail it. Just fertilize it every 4 weeks. Bam, bam, bam. Just go, go, go. Get back to your mowing. Push it. Biostimulants, sea kelp to push more roots and thicken that lawn up. And remember, if you've had this Poa Annua problem, you should forget seeding for the next several years. In fact, I probably would never seed again. I would just take care of what's there, and I'd love the lawn I'm with and love what I have. And that's what I would do. I wouldn't try to go any further outside of that because I don't want to risk that Poa Annua coming back. Now, when you do get to the spring, and by the way, you might want to do a second pre-emergent. It just depends how long the fall is going to last, how long the summer is going to last into winter. But typically, if you put the dithiopyr or prodiamine down at 3 pounds per thousand, you're going to get 3 months of protection out of that. So September, October, November, that'll be good enough for most of you. However, dithiopyr, you'd have a lot of that left that you could use according to the label. So maybe you do 3 pounds per thousand right at the beginning of September, as you know soil temperatures are going to fall to 70. And then 45 days later, you do it again. It won't hurt. Won't hurt at all. And that'll really help keep that Poa Annua from germinating, as well as if you do get a warm spell through the winter, you'll have some of that protection still there in case some of those escapees come in. And then you want to go ahead and put down your pre-emergent early the next spring, because there are always seeds that break the rule or break their natural whatever. Even though it's supposed to be a fall germinating annual, there's always going to be some that are just thrown off. They're like, well, here, I don't know, we missed our window last year, but we're here spring. Might as well germinate now. I got all this nice moisture all around me. Things are warming up, and I'm a Poa Annua. I'm going to go ahead and just germinate now in the spring. Why not? See what happens. Hope for the best. You might have that happen, and so keeping those spring pre-emergents down will be important too. And by the way, a pre-emergent strategy, a strong pre-emergent game will help you with so many other problems as well. Himbit, chickweed, there's a bunch. So I think even spurge maybe. So a lot of different weeds that you'll help keep out by going to that fall pre-emergent strategy. So you don't have to seed if you think this is the challenge that you have. Now, if you don't have that challenge, it's still okay. Nobody says you have to seed and aerate in the fall. Nobody says that. In fact, I know that 90% of you are not going to rent an aerator, either because you don't have the time to go and get it from wherever the rental shop is. You don't have the truck to pull it with. You don't pull the trailer with. You don't have the truck to put it in. You don't have the buddy to help you because you can't lift an aerator by yourself. It's a 2-person job, sometimes 3 when you're as old as me. So, and you forget to take the weight out of it. So I'm just saying, it's one of those things where you got to, do what's best. I love it if you do aeration and overseed, but you don't have to. So some of you that have had any kind of trouble at all during the summer. Use the fall as just a heavy fertilizing and pre-emergent strategy and push the lawn that way. Think of it just like your second spring. That's really all it is. So pre-emergence, fertilizer, pre-emergence, fertilizer. That's actually a lot easier on you, and I bet you'll still see a lot of great results. The only reason you really would aerate and overseed in the fall these days is if your lawn was still super thin for some reason. And that could be in a few cases. But I bet you'll see a lot of the lawns will come back. I bet you a lot of the damage that you're seeing here will come back. And so let's go on now to the other case that may come up, and that is Poa Trivialis. Poa Trivialis! So Poa Trivialis is what they call rough bluegrass. Now, I'm going to link to some articles if you're on YouTube about Poa Trivialis. The difference here is that Poa Trivialis actually spreads with stolons, and it's actually a perennial. So, but it still looks a lot like Kentucky bluegrass. It's a little easier to identify in the spring because it's a lighter green color. But I think the thing about this one is it may be also what some of you are seeing. Now, the example I just gave you, I verified that to be Poa Annua, but there could be some Poa Trivialis in there too, and some of you might be dealing with that because what Poa Trivialis will do, even though it's a perennial, it will also check out in the summer and lay down because it just can't handle the heat. And in fact, the thing about Poa Trivialis and Poa Annua too, but with Poa Trivialis is it's in a lot of seed mixes. They put it in a lot of shadier seed mixes because it does well in the shade, and that's why when you have it out in the middle of the sun, it will check out in the summer. The thing about it is because it's a perennial, it lives year after year after year, it'll come back in the fall. So what happens is, and I've seen this before too, where I'm working with somebody and everything looks good in the spring and they're sending me pictures of the lawn. This is back when I used to do lawn coaching. And I don't necessarily see the light green spots in their pictures. And then we get to summer and everything's looking good and then the lawn just checks out. Again, usually in the middle somewhere, it'll just check out. I'll be like, what the heck happened? We know it's not Poa Annua. And in a lot of cases, it's Poa Trivialis that just doesn't like the heat, so it just checks out. Now, the bluegrass or whatever can live around it and be fine, but the Poa Trivialis checks out. Then you get to fall, and it comes back, and they're like, hey, everything's good again. The problem is that continues to spread year after year after year, that Poa Triv does, because it has stolons, which are above-ground creepers, and it gets more and bigger and bigger and bigger. So this is a more difficult one, because you could cut it out in sod and that. But this is one of those, if you think you have Poa Trivialis, I don't necessarily recommend anything extra or special this fall with that, except for to monitor it. But definitely, why would you aerate and overseed? Just don't. Just go to the pre-emergence strategy. Just do that, like I talked about with Poa Annua. But when you get to next spring, this is where you have to be observant. And you get into next spring, you're going to notice light green, lime green patches in the lawn. That is more than likely Poa Trivialis. And like I said, it's been in a lot of seed mixes over the years, so some of you have seeded it in without realizing it, not your fault. But what you would do then is you would glyphosate, which is Roundup is the brand name. It's not that way anymore. I've tried to teach people about that. Glyphosate, active ingredient, kills everything. It is a non-selective herbicide. And you would glyphosate these areas, these light green areas, all spring. You have to just patrol those areas and glyphosate them. That is what you have to do in the spring. And it's terrible. It looks bad. But you're cutting those areas out. And then you can either resod those spots or put in seed or whatever you need to do. But that's one of those long-term strategies. If you believe you have Poa Trivialis, you really need to catch that one in the spring when you can see the light green patches. So that's kind of my advice there between those two different scourges that I'm seeing. I don't want everyone to think that that's what you have, but it's just another thing to consider as you're playing lawn detective and to pay attention to in future years. All right, that was a big one. So I'm going to play a little music now, and I'm going to take a little break. Hopefully get your blood pumping. And when we come back, we'll go into some more questions. You're listening to Lawns Across America 34.
Ahora estamos escucha mi salsa ahora, mi salsa para bailar, este ritmo tan sabroso, el ritmo para guarachar. Yo te canto con sentimiento y mañana te lo voy a dar. Muévese con sabrosura, abre la ventana para respirar. Escucha mi salsa buena, abre la ventana. Yo te traigo la salsa buena. Estamos gozando ahí nada más, que rico está. Escucha mi salsa buena, si yo te traigo mi salsa ahora. Ahí nada más, bueno, escucha de nuevo, mira. Los tambores se están arrollando, la banda está en candela ya, todo el mundo está bailando. Ven, ven, mi gente, vamos a gozar. Muévense con mi ritmo, un paso para adelante y un paso para atrás. Muévense con sabrosura, abre la ventana para respirar. Sí, escucha la salsa que te traigo ahora. Ahí a Nueva York, a La Habana, donde quiera. Sí, yo te traigo la salsa buena para bailar. Ahora sí, allá se fue melodía. Sabroso, qué rico está. Muchas gracias, mi gente.
All right, hope you like that one. Listen to my salsa. All right, now we're going to get some questions here. This one comes from Matt. Matt says, hey, it's been crazy hot here in the Northeast this year, so my wife bought a kiddie pool. It's great, but the grass underneath is now very matted and looks dead. Any suggestions on getting it back to looking great? I started Googling around yesterday and discovered that I have a ton of bent grass. Any suggestions on getting rid of that without a complete restart? I aerated and overseeded with turf-type tall fescue last year, and it looks great in certain spots. Huge fan, Matt. Okay, Matt, so there's two different things here. The first thing is the area under your pool is probably completely dead. A lot of guys will understand this if you do a slip and slide, which is usually just straight plastic. They'll put that out for the kids, and that only has to be out there for a few hours in deep sun, and it will kill the lawn. There's a way. The reason I brought this part up is I just think it's interesting. There's a way that they use, or a method they use here, to sterilize soil. Now, one way they do it is through fumigation, but that's something that we can't get to as DIYers. What fumigation does is it kills everything in the soil a certain amount deep. The other way you can do it, though, is what's called solarization. And what they do is in fields, they'll put out, you'll see this in the farm fields here too, but you can do it for sod or grass or whatever, is you put this plastic out and then the sun beats down on the plastic, and that heat is magnified into the soil, and it goes deep enough that and hot enough that it literally kills everything in the soil and sterilizes it. So then you can plant safely on top of that, and it'll kill seeds and everything else. Because one of the things people don't realize is if you glyphosate a lawn, it kills the living stuff, but it doesn't kill seeds. Things have to be living and germinated. If seeds are there, it won't kill seeds under the ground, FYI. But solarization does. And when you have a kiddie pool on top of the lawn, that is or a slip and slide, but in this case, a kiddie pool, that is essentially what it's doing. So depending how long that kiddie pool was there, I'm assuming that grass is dead and is not going to come back, because the other thing that a kiddie pool does is it has a lot of weight. So it crushes the grass as well as focuses the sun. Now, sometimes the kiddie pool is a little bit darker and therefore the heat doesn't heat up, but it's the weight that also causes a problem. So what I would recommend for those of you in the future that are doing kiddie pools is you rotate your kiddie pool or empty it every night. I know that's a pain in the rear end, but it's just one of those things, or put it on your patio or whatever. So I think what you're going to have to do there, Matt, is you're going to have to reseed that area. So do what you can now. I mean, it's a little hot to be seeding right now, but that's really the best bet. I'm pretty sure that area is not going to come back, so be ready for some seed. This is where the Scott's Patchmaster comes in. They don't sponsor me or anything like that, but it works great. You go out, rough the area up, put your seed down. Scott's Patchmaster has seed in it, but I always like to fortify with my own. If you're using the, what did you say here, some turf-type tall fescue, maybe you got that from GCI, from my friend Pete or whatever. Go in, rough the area up, put your seed down, put the Scott's Patchmaster over top, and water it every day. You'll regrow that grass there real nice. Won't be a problem. Now, bent grass. Okay, so bent grass is one we're seeing a lot of right now. The way you'll typically know bent grass is it's a little bit lighter green, but it likes to grow in wet areas, low-lying areas. It likes that, as well as you can pull it up really easy. It literally has almost no underground root system. It just grows above the ground. When you're mowing tall at 3.5 or 4 inches, it'll lay flat real bad, and you can pull it, and it'll just pull right out, just pull right up. So bent grass is a scourge. I used to see it a lot over by Crete, Illinois. I used to have a route in Crete over by there, which is kind of, south of Chicago Heights, south of 30, Route 30, Lincoln Highway over there in south side Chicago. I used to see a lot of bent grass in Crete. I think it was from the local golf course. They had bent grass fairways, and people would, I don't know if they took stuff home with them or whatever. It doesn't take a lot. Or they would steal the sand fill from the carts and bring that to their lawns. I don't really know. But either way, lots of bent grass. So if you have bent grass, it's not hard to identify. Like Matt did, he Googled around. It's pretty easy to identify that one from pictures on the internet. So if you have bent grass, it depends what you're able to do. But because it pulls up so easy, I recommend you pull it up and resod. It seems like that's going to be a theme here in this podcast. But there's nothing wrong with sodding. It's just an instant fix. It's surgery. It blots out the sun so other stuff can't come in. I would recommend you just pull up all the bent grass. It doesn't pull up that hard. Pull up the spots and sod. Now, if you can't do that, then you can use tenacity. Tenacity will work pretty well on it. Might take a couple applications, but tenacity is what you want. Mesotrione. We have that on Yard Mastery. We don't have tenacity. We have the generic meso. It's a little bit cheaper. It's off patent now, so you can get tenacity pretty cheap. And that works well. It's a decent weed control for a lot of different things. It'll kill crabgrass too, so you get a couple different uses out of it. And works well. It'll turn it kind of white, so it takes a little bit of time, but it might take a couple laps. But either way, personally, I think it's just easier to pull the bent grass, drop sod or whatever, and then use tenacity to clean up what comes back later. But it'll take it a little while to come back, especially if you sod, because again, sod also helps you to instantly crowd out any type of competition. So that's what I would recommend there. One other thing on the tenacity I'll mention is, this is just interesting. It's labeled to be used on St. Augustine grass, but it says for sod production only. So if you look at a label of tenacity, it'll say that. You can use it on a lot of different grass types, but I mentioned St. Augustine because it says sod production only. And I always thought, well, does that mean it's not going to harm sod, but it'll harm home lawns? And so I asked somebody one time, a sod grower, and I said, why is that? And he goes, it just means that we sod growers saw that as a tool that we needed, so we were able to petition the company to get sod farm production labeled as okay, but we didn't take it all the way to residential. I guess in order for a manufacturer to get something labeled for residential versus sod is different. Sod farms it's different. It's more paperwork, for example. So they knew that they had enough demand in sod farms for it. So they went ahead and labeled it there, but they didn't take all the extra steps or paperwork that was needed to label it for residential use. So will it ding your St. Augustine? According to this sod grower, it will ding the St. Augustine slightly, but let me just tell you guys, everything dings St. Augustine. So that is that. I am not telling you to buy mesotrione for your St. Augustine in a residential setting because you'll be breaking the rules, you'll be breaking the label. I'm just telling you why it's only labeled for sod production, because apparently that's as far as they wanted to go. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I've seen it used also. If you watch the Millennial Farmer, Zach, he uses it in his fields. And I always thought that's interesting because he has Roundup Ready corn, which is Roundup Ready corn is a generic term. It means it can handle glyphosate, and they just hose their fields down with glyphosate, right? And it kills everything. But I think they have a resistant weed called lamb's quarters that's resistant to glyphosate, and there are those things. And I think that's why he had to spike some mesotrione into one of his mixes one time. So that's kind of interesting. I love watching the farming channels because there's so much I can learn from those that kind of go over and kind of overlap with some of the stuff that we're doing. All right, now I want to go into some recordings. It's going to be fun. I got a few recordings that came in this week. We'll talk through some of these and some different concepts here. So this one comes from Jerry in Salt Lake City.
Hey, Alan. This is Jared. I am from just outside Salt Lake City, Utah, and I had a question about slugs in the yard. My grass is a generic cool season blend, turf type tall fescue, bluegrass in there as well. And the slugs are probably really loving my garden more than anything. I see most of them there, but I do see them spread out throughout the rest of the lawn as well. It's about 4,000 square foot. And there don't seem to be a lot of products out there that are reasonably affordable and that will hit or are meant to be spread across the whole lawn and not just kind of spot drop on the garden. So I was wondering if you had any tips for maybe getting rid of slugs. trying to say, is it really bad for the slugs to be in there? Are they going to be destroying grass, maybe new seed that I do in the fall, or preventing any of the biostimulant stuff from being as effective? Thank you for listening, and look forward to your response. Bye.
All right, Jared. Sorry, I called you Jerry. It's Jared. So this is a good one, and one that comes in every so often. So the thing about slugs is, I'll just tell you straight up, you don't have to worry about them for the lawn. They're not going to harm the lawn at all. They're just another living thing that's down there. However, they will crawl out of the lawn and across your sidewalks. You'll see the slime trails. They're kind of shiny sometimes. You'll see them in the morning. They will crawl into your landscape, and they'll eat some of your different leafy green foliage up over by there. One that I used to see when I lived in Chicago that slugs would always chew on are hosta, and I love hosta. And the slugs would always get on those and they'd put holes in them and stuff. And every once in a while, we'd have a sneaky sales guy that would try to sell people tree and shrub treatments for holes in hostas, which never worked. But that is what it is. So if you have slugs and you're concerned about them coming out of the lawn and going over and chewing on your hosta or other flowers or whatever, I also see them on sweet potato vines. People put sweet potato vines sometimes like in their beds because they're real pretty and they'll crawl or they'll fall out of pots and stuff. They love to eat on those. So if you want to help with that, I used to tell people to just put sand underneath the plants. So first of all, no, don't kill them in the lawn. Nothing to worry about there. They're just going to do their thing there, but they will crawl over into the landscape beds. And if you want to, you can surround your plants with sand. That will help. And then another thing that works fairly well, and the reason I know this is because this is what we used to tell people when they would have hosta that had holes in them. We would tell them to do this, and it worked very well, is diatomaceous earth. What diatomaceous earth is actually the fossilized remains of these organisms called diatoms, which are microscopic organisms found in the ocean, and there's these deposits of them, or their skeletal remains or whatever the term would be. That's diatomaceous earth, and they harvest this, and it's really just 90% silica is what it is. And so what happens is when you put that around your plants, it literally cuts up the slugs. It's also good against a lot of insects and things like that. So it's one of those things that you can get. It's non-invasive. It's considered natural and all of that. So I would try diatomaceous earth and sand, a combination of both. Sprinkle that around all your plants if the slugs are bothering them, but I would not necessarily go after them in the lawn. There's no need to use a chemical or waste a chemical. All right, next, let's go on to Lucas in Wichita.
Hey, Alan. My name's Lucas in Wichita, Kansas. I have a tall fescue and about 50% Bermuda. Really, I just need some inspiration. I guess I feel like giving up. I've been trying since November, working on my lawn, watching your videos. I have the BioStim pack, and I've used other products. I have 3 young kids, and I feel like I just don't have the time that I want, that I need to put into it to give it the love that it needs. And I just feel like giving up on it. But I'm a nut, and I want to keep going. Thank you. Bye.
All right, Lucas, you're not alone, buddy. So the first thing is you have a really interesting challenge, and it ain't the kids, because a lot of people have that challenge. The challenge is that you live in the transition zone, and you have 50% Bermuda and 50% tall fescue. Those are like 2 diametrically opposed grass types. The tall fescue wants to do really well in the spring and the fall, and the Bermuda wants to lay back and do nothing, and the Bermuda wants to run hard in the summer while the fescue wants to check out. So it's like you have not only this battle with you and time and being encouraged, you have this literal battle going on in your lawn. And I'm going to tell you, for me, if that was my challenge, I would say pick one or the other, right? But man, that's a lot of work. So to pick one or the other. And I'm going to tell you that no matter what you do, the Bermuda's always going to come back. So if you were going to choose one of the two, I would say choose the Bermuda. However, where you live, it's going to be, it's going to take it a really slow start in the spring, and it'll be beautiful in the summer, but man, and then it's going to go out quick in the fall, right? Because you're in that transition zone. It's a challenge, right? So what I would say is, if you're 50-50 right now, is go to a fun strategy. Don't worry about any of the strategies I teach. Just go to a fun strategy and see which one of them decides to win out. So what I would do and both of them can handle nitrogen. I would keep with the biostimulants. I would hammer those in there. And I would also fertilize every 4 weeks all during the year and just see who does what, who comes out on top. Just make the challenge to see which one of those grass types is going to do better. Now, how are you going to mow it, right? Well, maybe you're going to mow taller in the spring and lower in the summer. Maybe you'll experiment the other way. Maybe you'll mow tall all the time. Maybe you'll mow low all the time. Just kind of see what happens. Like, you have such an interesting challenge. So don't look at it like I need to have a perfect lawn like everybody I see online. Make it like, man, I got a challenge here and I'm going to do some experiments. I'm going to try different things, even getting herbicides. I mean, I think you could use tenacity on both of those. But anyway, I mean, you got so many challenges, right? Maybe a disease comes in and hacks the tall fescue. Well, then that's when the Bermuda wins out for 1 year. Maybe you have a really dry summer and they both fade out. I don't know. I would look at it that way, though, and I would just document it that way. But I would definitely always feed the soil. That's what I'm getting at. Work on the soil. Soil. So that means, obviously, the biostimulants, humic acid, all of those things. I would hammer it with humic. If you want to use some biochar in there, all the good stuff we talk about. Hammer the soil and let nature sort itself out. And then you can choose the mowing heights. You can choose the watering. And then and take it a challenge that way. Obviously, spraying weeds. But then the other thing is, with your kids, I mean, I think one of the best things you can do is just get the kids interested in the lawn, man. Get them a bubble mower. I don't know how old your kids are, but get them the bubble mower, get them out there. It's okay if it takes all day to mow your lawn because you're also out there with the kids at the same time. You set the sprinkler up. You let them play in the sprinkler while you mow over here. Whatever. It doesn't have to be perfect. There's nothing wrong with having a used lawn, a lawn that is well used. I guess that's the right term, right? It's like somebody that has a show car that they only drive on Sundays versus your daily driver. Well, you have a daily driver lawn. What's wrong with that, man? Nothing wrong with that. Try to make it the best it can so your kids can enjoy it while you watch the experimentation take place. I will tell you that I think that Bermuda will do a lot better under the foot traffic, so maybe that's something you do. So I would look at it that way. I would try to run some experiments that way. Make it more of a fun thing. Make it more of a mad scientist thing rather than I got to have a perfect lawn thing. And then when your kids grow up, man, you make them mow it for you. And then that kind of puts some more time for you to maybe look at doing some different things or maybe look at changing it. But by then you will have learned so many different things about these two grass types that you have that you will have been able to make a decision of where you want to go further down the line. Because here's the thing, your kids won't be little forever. My kids are grown and gone now, so I can do anything in my lawn I want. And I don't have any distractions that way. And kids aren't a distraction, but you get what I'm saying. So Lucas, I hope that helped you to maybe look at it a little bit different way. All right, now we're going to go to Jackie on Long Island. This is one I've really wanted to talk about for a while. It's going to be a little bit of a longer segment, but it's a good one to bring up. And this is on sprayers and the chemicals in those sprayers. Let's hear from Jackie.
Hey, Alan. This is Jackie from Long Island, New York. My grass is Kentucky Blue and a fescue mix. Here's my question, and it may be kind of a dumb one, but I'm willing to put it out there. As far as sprayers, what I've been doing is become kind of neurotic about what sprayers to use for what. So I've been using I have marked one of my sprayers for micronutrients and sea kelp and that kind of stuff, and then I have a separate sprayer for herbicides and stuff to kill weeds and all that stuff. Is that correct? And here's my other question: what do people do when they have big industrial size sprayers that they use for different things? Like I guess I'm just paranoid that I don't clean it out enough to use it for one application to the next, like to use it to kill weeds and then clean it out to use it for like humic or something like that. So just random thoughts, figuring it out there. All right, appreciate it. Thanks, Alan. Bye.
All right, Jackie, first of all, this is the smartest question that I've had in a long time. So it's exactly the opposite of what you thought out there on Long Island, which I continue to say, as many of you as I hear from on Long Island, that must be a really long island. All right, so here is the thing. This is a smart question, and it's one I haven't covered before, and I need to, and we're going to go through it. So let me just tell you what I do, And what you do as a homeowner is a little different than what you do as a pro, but you asked what the pros do. So we're going to talk through that because it'll help us to open some windows of understanding to what we do as DIYers. So the first thing is I have 2 sprayers. Now, I want to talk to you about sprayers real quick because this is important. So there's a company called the Fountainhead Group. Now, they sent me a sprayer. They sent me 2. And so this is sponsored in that way that they sent me this, but they sent this to me because they knew I would like it, and they were right. And I've talked about this a lot now, so it's worth it. So this company is called the Fountainhead Group, and they sent me a Field King 2-gallon battery sprayer. Now, I recommend all of you from now on, now that battery sprayers are much better quality, that you always use that. I don't use a hand pump sprayer for anything at all anymore. You do pay a little bit more for a battery sprayer, and 3 or 4 years ago, when all we had was like 1 or 2 that weren't available to us, that weren't really that great of quality, you know, I would have said, you don't need them. But now you got everything. The Sprayers Plus is still good. People ask me about that. They're still good, but I found this is better. And then you can go up to the Flow Zone, Tornado, Typhoon, Hurricane, Volcano. I don't know. They have all of those. Are like the higher end ones. I don't have one of those, but those are awesome. But what I have is a Field King 2-gallon battery sprayer. Now, here's the thing, and I have model 190571. But if you go to the Fountainhead Group website, what you're going to find the Fountainhead Group is they are a company that makes sprayers, and then they buy licenses to brand them differently. But it's usually the same sprayer. So in other words, you might find the exact same sprayer that's called Field King, that's called Scott's, that's called Roundup, that's called Husqvarna. It's the same exact deal. It's just got a different brand on it because they realize that some people trust the name Husqvarna, so they'll buy that, or some people trust the name Scott's, so they'll buy that, but it's really the same thing. It's a pretty smart business model, actually. So the Fountainhead Group, their brand is the Field King, I believe, and that's the one that they sent to me. But the thing that I like about it is it's not a typical battery-powered sprayer like you think. Most battery-powered sprayers, there's a pump on there, and the pump grabs the liquid from the bottom and pumps it out. This is not that. This is literally a compressor that goes on the top and forces air in to push the product out through the sprayer. So it works a little differently, and it's actually, in my opinion, a little bit cleaner because there's no clogging that can happen that way. When you have an actual pump at the bottom that's sucking stuff through, you can have clogging, and this way it's pushing air through so there's no clogging. And I just like the way it works because you can have any of those sprayers that the Fountainhead Group makes. They're all shaped like a bowling pin. And if you look up the Field King 190571, you'll recognize that shape. You can get any of their other sprayers that have that same shape, and that same exact battery compressor head will fit on any of them. Whereas if you have a sprayer that's got a pump at the bottom of it, that's all you can use. You can't interchange it. So I have 2 sprayers. I have one battery, but I just bought a cheaper one. So let me go over this real quick. And there's a reason why I'm telling you I have 2. It's very important. So I have the model Field King 190571, okay? But there's also a Scott sprayer model, same thing, and it has the same battery, and it's a model 190567, but it's $5 cheaper. So that's what I mean. You don't have to buy the Field King one. If you find the Scott's one on Amazon and it's $5 cheaper, buy that one. It's the same thing. Maybe some of the accessories that it comes with, the tips are a little different. In some cases, the wand might be a higher quality, but for us, we don't necessarily have to worry about all that. We're not taking these things out in the back of trucks, and doing 15 lawns a day. So there's a Lesco has one branded now, model 190594. You probably pay a lot for that just because they put the Lesco name on it. They sell it to pros, so they charge them more. Thanks, Lesco. There's a Roundup branded one, model 190570. There's a Husqvarna model 190641. All of those are the same, and they all come with the same battery compressor on the top. Okay? So find the cheapest one you can. Now, the second one that I buy then is that same sprayer, and I say that it's that bowling pin shaped one, but I buy one that doesn't have the battery. So there's like a Roundup commercial one that's a model 190427, and it's the same thing. It just doesn't come with a battery, and it's only like $30, right? So I paid like $90, and I say I had mine sent to me for free, but I'm giving you the idea. So I have the one that I paid for with the battery that's $90, and then you buy a second one, a cheaper one, for $30, but you can move the compressor from one to the other. That's a way to save a little bit of money. You don't need 2 batteries with this because, again, I mean, you could if you wanted to, and then they're interchangeable. But the idea is you get the one battery, and then you can buy as many of these bowling pin-shaped sprayers for $30 that you want and just move the compressor to each one. Okay, so that's the first thing. Now, why do I have 2 sprayers? And we're going to go through this. and this is going to answer your question, Jackie. So the first thing is I have one sprayer that is dedicated only to glyphosate. Glyphosate, again, there's a brand name called Roundup that used to be glyphosate. Roundup does a lot of other things now. They're trying to get away from glyphosate, but glyphosate is an active ingredient, and it is known because it is a non-selective herbicide. There are other non-selective herbicides like diquat, things like that, but glyphosate is the most well-known. It's the cheapest. You can get a gallon of it really cheap. I don't know, like under $20. It's so cheap. That's why people like glyphosate. It kills almost everything, kills everything that you're going to face, and it's cheap, and it's effective. Okay, kills in about 6 or 7 days, sometimes quicker, depending how hot it is outside. So I have one sprayer for glyphosate, and I use that in my beds. I spot spray all the weeds in my beds with glyphosate. You can do that. I'm not hosing it. It's spot spraying. You can get even close to your bushes with it. It's not going to hurt anything. Now, be careful, okay? But you can spot spray all stuff. Don't hose, spot, okay? So I spot spray it, and I don't get glyphosate that has surfactants built into it or anything. Just straight 41% glyphosate. Just Google it. I think there's a brand name called Eraser out there you can still get. I got some old Home Depot stuff, HDX, because literally a gallon, I have a 2.5 gallon I've had for like 5 years. I don't use that much glyphosate in a year. Literally maybe less than 6 ounces a year, right? It's one of those things. People are worried about glyphosate, but I mean, as a DIYer, I only spray glyphosate a few times a year going across my bed, spot spraying, and I don't get it on me when I do. Everybody thinks you're always going to get chemical on you. I mean, if you're getting chemical on you, you're doing it wrong. Yeah, I wear my PPE, but I'm not spraying in the wind. I'm not walking on top of it. It doesn't get on you. Again, if you get it on you, you're doing it wrong. But I use that one sprayer just for glyphosate. Now, there's another thing that I use it for because I have glyphosate-tolerant St. Augustine grass here. I have Scott's Provista. You could call that Roundup-ready St. Augustine grass. They don't like that term, but that's what people would understand. I use it in there too because that glyphosate is what I can use. That grass has been bred to be tolerant of glyphosate. And so when I get wild Bermuda in there or I get torpedo grass in there or any other weeds, I use glyphosate on that. But for the majority of you, 99.9% of you listening to this, you will use glyphosate just for your beds. And I recommend that you do. It doesn't hurt anything. It's fine. Okay, unless you're worried about that. But that's my one sprayer, and that is all that goes in it, and that's all that's dedicated to. It doesn't get anything else, and it's labeled glyphosate. I don't put anything else in it ever. And I leave the glyphosate in there. I've always got a gallon of it mixed up. It doesn't go bad on you. That people ask how long I leave it. I've never had it go bad on me, but, you know, I probably have 2 gallons of it. It'll last me a year. I mix it up one time in the spring, and then it's empty by the end of the year. It never goes bad. Okay? All right, so that's that. Now, the second sprayer that I have, remember I have one battery top. The second sprayer I have is used for biostimulants, fertilizers, fungicides, insecticides, weed controls, and pre-emergence liquids, okay? That's the second one. Now, we're going to leave the weed control out for a second. Or actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you how pros do it. So here's what a pro would do is when they are switching product. So we're talking about like a True Green truck, 350-gallon, 300-gallon tank on there. They got a spray rig, all that, right? When they're switching, say, from fungicides to insecticides, right? What they're going to do is they're going to triple rinse the tank. And this is the way that you should do it, too, if you're going from product to product. And I'm going to tell you the real way I do it. I'm telling you the right way, the professional way, and then I'm going to tell you the actual way. This is the real way, the professional way, the right way, okay? So when you move from one product to another, you do what's called a triple rinse. So in your case, they do it with big sprayers. You would do this with your little sprayer, your little 2-gallon. First of all is you pump it to empty, okay? So whatever it is, you got to pump it to empty. You got to find a way to do that. If it's a fungicide, you can just put a little extra somewhere else or whatever you got to do. If it's an insecticide, same thing. You know, you pump it to empty. You fill it up with water, okay? And then you get a bucket and you spray out through the wand with that water only that you put in there. You spray out through that wand for 45 seconds, okay? Then you take that water that you have in there and you agitate it and shake it around and you pour it out. It's called rinseate at that point. That's what it's called, rinseate. For us as a homeowner, you would put that in a rocky area. I have an area of my house that's all rocks. And there's no plants around it or anything, and I dump it in that rocky area. That's what you have to do as a homeowner. That's how you have to take care of your rinseate. You don't really have much else that you can do. And that's why I'm going to tell you the real way I do it in a minute, because I avoid rinseate, okay? But I'm just telling you, for a True Green or a professional company, they actually have a rinseate tank that they pump their rinseate into. And what they'll do is with their rinsate, they will mix it back into their future mixes. And I don't remember what the percentage was. I think it was 10%. Like, so when you were filling a new truck, you were able to use all the water. You'd put in you put in water and concentrates, and then 10% of your mix could also be rinsate, because it's so watered down at that point that it won't hurt anything. But we never contaminated Roundup in there. It's a whole nother thing. But that's what they would do with rinsate. Rinsate management, by the way, is a whole challenge for professional operators. And if you couldn't get rid of all your rinsate by the end of the year, you'd have to pay someone to come and take it away, and that gets expensive. Again, I'm going to tell you how we do it as homeowners, but let me go back to it. So the triple rinse. So you rinse, you put in all water, you depress your wand out for 45 seconds into a bucket, then you dump that. Then you fill it again, you do the same thing, 45 seconds, shake it all up, pour it out, do the third rinse, and then you're done. That's called a triple rinse. 99% of products that you get, in fact, 100% of ones that homeowners come in contact with, a triple rinse is considered good enough to move on to the next product. That's called triple rinsing, okay? Now, again, you got that rinsate you had to deal with. You had to pour that out over rocks somewhere in your lawn, and I don't like that. And nobody talks about rinsate. There's nothing really on any labels that I know that talk about what to do with rinsate as a homeowner, right? So I'm going to tell you how I do it to where I have zero or almost zero rinsate. But that's how you do it, Jackie. That's how you would move things. Now, let me go to what's the truth. So you got to realize you're treating one lawn, and it's all the same grass type, and the products that you're putting out are only for that lawn, right? It's not like you have to deal with, like my friend Paul Outlaw. Like, he has to deal with centipede lawns, Bermuda lawns, tall fescue lawns. I don't think he has any St. Augustine. But he has to go from all these different grass types. So he has a lot of juggling he has to do for his tanks on his permagreen, right? Lots of different things he has to do. So he has to know what can be used where. So there's a lot of rinsing that he has to do in between. We don't have that to do that. We're a homeowner. You have one lawn. So all of the products that you purchase for your lawn are only for your lawn. In other words, you don't have stuff sitting in you said you have Kentucky bluegrass and fescue. Jackie, you don't have stuff sitting in your garage that could harm that, because you would never buy it. There'd just be no reason, right? So when you're going from application to application, you don't really have to rinse in between. And when I say that, let's say you sprayed out a biostimulant today, and then tomorrow you're going to spray fungicide. So what I would do is, after my biostimulant was done, you're emptying the tank all the way out, especially with the biostimulant. You're emptying the tank all the way out. I would fill it halfway with water, and I would spray some out of the nozzle just so things don't get sticky in there. And I would just leave that water. And then the next day, when I go to do my fungicide, I go ahead and mix my fungicide in, fill the rest up with water, and spray it out on the lawn. And then when I'm done with that, I'm going to fill it halfway with water. I'm going to spray a little bit through the wand and rinse that out, right? Pour it back into there, I'm not explaining this the right way. I would run my wand out with the water that I put in there, and then I would just pour that back in, and I would leave that sitting there with a gallon of what's really mostly water, but a little bit of the fungicide in there. And then let's say a month later I came back and I need to spray insecticide. Well, then I would just mix my insecticide in there, right? Fill it up with water, spray it all out, then fill it up with water, rinse the lines out a little bit. That's how I would do it. And then you could go back to biostimulants after that. The idea being that when you go from fungicide to insecticide to biostimulants, you don't have enough residue in that tank to really do anything anyway. And then secondly, none of it's going to harm your lawn either. You do want to wash things out. And when I say wash things out, it's really the lines that you want to wash out. And you do that just by spraying for 45 seconds in a bucket after you've put clean water in there, and then just pour the water back in. It's all watered down enough that it's not going to hurt anything. I hope that makes sense. This way you have no rinsate. You're just literally using the wash water from the first to the next, okay? Because it's watered down enough, and nothing that you're using is going to hurt your lawn. Now, the only time that I do a triple rinse is after a weed control. So if I'm going to spray for weeds. Now, I only spray for weeds once a year, if that. I use granular pre-emergence for the most part. But if I'm going to use any kind of weed control, like a Pennant Magnum pre-emergent, which we use down here in the South, or if you're going to spot spray for weeds, you really only do that in the spring, maybe the fall. But that's about it. So I will triple rinse after those applications. And the reason I triple rinse after weed control is because sometimes when I'm spraying biostimulants, for example, I'll move over and squirt and give some to my bushes or my trees or my palms or whatever. In your case up there, maybe your lilacs or whatever you got up there, Jackie. So you don't want that weed control residual in there, but a little insecticide residual won't hurt anything. A little fungicide residual won't hurt anything. Obviously, fertilizer residual won't hurt anything. So just the only time I triple rinse is after a weed control. Other than that, I don't triple rinse in between. I just go from application to application, knowing that I'm putting enough water in to water down whatever was there previously, and that none of it's going to hurt the lawn anyway. So there you go, Jackie. There is how I do it with my 2-sprayer usage, and then how I kind of avoid rinseate, but then also how the pros do it. So I hope that was helpful to you. That was a little bit of a long one. I'm going to go to a little bit of music here. We're going to come back and take a couple more of your calls.
There's no place I'd rather be. The feeling within makes me carry on. Let's just come undone. Is this how it feels now? You don't want to get too close. Ready or not, here we go again. We may stumble and fall, but we play to win. 'Cause it ain't me who's been caught in a landslide. It ain't me you've been thinking about. We may lose what we got, but we're never gonna stop. There's two sides to everything. The star shines brighter now. There's nothing we can do, but you win some, you lose some along the road. God only knows. You're changing your mind like I change my clothes. How far can we fall? Well, nobody knows. It ain't me who's been caught in a landslide. It ain't me you've been thinking about. We may lose what we got, but we're never gonna stop. There's two sides to everything. The world keeps spinning faster now. Dig your feet in the dirt and enjoy the who's been caught in a landslide. It ain't me you've been thinking about. It ain't me who's been caught in a landslide. It ain't me you've been thinking about. We may lose what we got, but we're never gonna stop. There's two sides to everything.
All right. Hope you guys enjoyed that one. I like playing a little music in there. Gives me a break. Kind of rest a little bit. All right, let's go now. We got 2 more questions here on the podcast. Let's go to Evans. Got a little Bermuda.
Hey, Alan.
Oh, that was wrong. Here we go.
Hey, Alan, this is Evans here in Greenville, South Carolina. It looks like we have some Bermuda grass, and we have some temperatures in the low 90s pretty constant. I'm a new homeowner, and I just started your plan. Looks like I have quite a bit of weeds in my lawn, ranging from clover, flat sedge, Dallas, dog fennel, buffalo. I have applied post-emergent of Image, and unfortunately that didn't really do a whole lot with the existing weeds. I'm currently undergoing some irrigation changes, adding some heads, repositioning those heads to make sure all areas are covered. It does look like some areas are struggling more than others. Per the Lawn Mastery app, you are recommending right now to fertilize, throw down some RGS and some microgreen. I was curious in the meantime if you had any other recommendations as to what I can do to possibly get the soil, just re-energized. It just looks like it's extremely hard, not a whole lot of nutrients in there. And I was wondering if you could help me and point me in the right direction. Thank you for your help.
All right, Evans, great questions. And by the way, thanks, man, for calling in, because I could see you're into it, you're new, and it's awesome that you're making some good decisions here. So you tried the image for southern lawns, which is what I typically recommend for those of you starting out. You can get that over the counter at most Home Depot and Lowe's, and apparently in his case, it did not work on all of the weeds, or maybe not that many. So your investment there was $19, so I think that's always worth it to learn. And if you don't get the results you want, then you can move on to something else. And so in this case, I would recommend that you upgrade now and get Celsius. Celsius is more expensive. It's $129 for a 10-ounce bottle. However, because it's a professionally formulated product, that 10-ounce bottle will cover 2 acres. So you have to realize when you're buying a professionally formulated product, it's designed for pros who are going to be spraying acreage. They're going to spray sometimes 2 acres in a day, so you as a homeowner, that will last you for years. So invest that. We have that available at yardmastery.com. Celsius is going to take care of a good amount of what you're dealing with. It won't take care of sedges, though. And so if sedges are a problem, get some sedge hammer there. But either way, go for that next level. Celsius is what I call that weekend muscle. You got your daily driver, which I recommend is the image for southern lawns. But if that daily driver isn't doing it for you, get that weekend muscle. Celsius is an excellent one. Now, as far as the soil goes, I would recommend, Evans, that you stay the course. I know that you look at your soil and you don't think there's a lot there, but there is. Your soil is not bad. There are beautiful lawns that grow in that same soil that don't have any care at all. So don't think that you have to make your lawn perfect overnight. It's kind of like building a business. Everybody would love to start out with a $10 million business, but you don't. You start out with zero. And you take some time to build the business over time. And that's how you do with the soil, too. You look at it like a business. I'm going to build it now over time. I'm going to put good things into it over time. So stick with what the plan is. You got the RGS, the microgreen. Both of those have humic acid in them, as well as both of those have sea kelp. And that is going to help continue to move the soil along. You don't have to hammer it all in at one time. There isn't like a miracle that you need to try to perform on it. Just keep it going. And make sure, too, that you get in those best practices. Keep that mowing going. I'll tell you what, mulch mowing is really the best thing, and water. If you keep the lawn irrigated, which he's working on that because he's working on his irrigation, and mulching when you mow, those are really the 2 best things to do for the lawn. And it takes a little bit of time for that to really start to kick in and start to work, as well as your grass thickens up and there's more roots down in that soil, those roots are going to help to make the soil more healthy. So all of that kind of plays along with it and together. Now, if you do want to do something, because I know that a lot of you want to do something. So if you want to do something to kind of, I don't know, how do you say it? Maybe push the lawn a certain, I don't know, juice it up, I guess would be a term. Then there is nothing wrong. And I'll do this too. I've been saying this doing this at my place. Whenever I don't like the way the lawn looks, for some reason, it looks a little faded, or I don't know, it just doesn't look vigorous, I hammer it with humic acid. So humic 12 is what we have, 9 ounces per 1,000, and I water it in. There's something about, and that's a carbon source. There's just something about it. It's a chelator. It'll pull out nutrients that you didn't know were there. It'll help water holding capacity in the soil. It helps microorganisms to flourish. Humic acid, and listen, I know I talk about it a lot nowadays. I never used to talk about it because we never used it. It wasn't anything I was ever taught at True Green. I was always taught starter fert fixes everything, throw her down every 4 weeks, high nitrogen. And you can tell that's still in a lot of my vernacular. But over the years, not just talking with John Perry and those guys, but also talking with these sod growers. I go to sod farms several times a year. They all are using humic acid. They are to grow their sod. They just are. And they have to watch their soil because they lose a little bit of their soil every time they harvest. So they really have to care for the soil that they have. And humic acid really works. So if you really want something to juice it, do 9 ounces per 1,000 of humic acid of the humic 12. You probably have that now because I'm assuming you have a biostimulant pack. You can put that down right now in the heat. Won't hurt anything, won't burn anything, and water it in. and that'll be a little bit of a jump start for you. Now, the other thing that you could do if you want is we have X soil now. X soil is essentially just the biochar infused with the chicken litter. It doesn't have any added nutrients to it or anything. You can put that down really heavy. You will see a visual change in the lawn, but we don't sell it as a fertilizer. But that's another way to juice up the soil. Now, you put that down at 10 to 20 pounds per 1,000 square feet. I would recommend just stay at the lower rate of 10 pounds per 1,000. But that will also help your clay. It'll also put a lot of good, get some microbial activity going in there. Obviously, biochar is good for the soil. Just a good additive. So those are two things you could do if you just couldn't stand it and you just really wanted to just hit the lawn with something hard. By the way, I did want to say we also have a new product that we've rolled out, and it's called Balance DIY. It looks like BLAX DIY, Balance DIY from Carbon Earth Company. It's a 16:4:8 formulation, if you like that 4:1:2 ratio, if you're into that. As well as it's got biochar, just like all of the Carbon Earth products do. So you get the 16:4:8 analysis, as well as the biochar infused with the chicken litter, which is going to give you some miners. And then it's also got peptides in it, called Xenar technology, which is their newest way of including the peptides. Everything that Carbon Earth gives us has peptides in it, but Xenar is kind of their newest way. They don't put it in all the products, but Xenar is the newest way of delivering those peptides. So what you get is you get the 16:4:8 plus some micros, not a ton, but 16:4:8 plus some micros, plus biochar, plus you get a stimulant, a biostimulant in the form of the peptide. So it's really a complete fertilizer. If you guys want to try it out, you can find it at yardmastery.com or thelawncarenut.com. All right, we got one more here for you today. Let me get myself over there. And here we go. We're going up to Boston.
Hey, Alan. It's Daniel calling from outside Boston, Massachusetts. I have most likely bluegrass and turf-type fescue mix. I usually try to plant Jonathan Green's Black Beauty Ultra. My question is that, we've had a lot of really hot days here, and the grass, for the most part, some of it has turned brown, especially where the kids, ride their power wheels, high traffic areas in the lawn. It's just matted brown straw in some places. And I'm wondering if there's a way I can get that stuff up and remove it, so come fall, I can, have a place to plant grass which will stand up to the heat a little bit better. Thanks a lot. I enjoy your podcast. Keep up the good work.
Great question, and one that a lot of you all have. I mean, obviously, not all lawns are there to be looked at. Some are there to be used. And I'm going to tell you, we used to have a friend. I had a friend growing up. His name was Brent. And growing up in Florida, we didn't wear a lot. We didn't wear shirts. I mean, it's Florida, so you just always were wearing your jams. We used to call them jams. They call them board shorts now. We call them jams. But anyway, you're always wearing your jams and your flip-flops. And when we got older, we'd start getting a little hair in our chest, but my buddy Brent never did. We'd always make fun of him, and he'd say, hey, man, grass don't grow on a playground. And you can get the inference there. But it's true. Grass won't grow on a playground. So if your kids are trampling on the lawn, especially when it's already under stress from heat, you're never going to be able to grow grass there. It's just how it works. It's the same thing with people that have dogs. Dogs tend to run in the same trails all the time in a backyard. You're never going to be able to grow grass in a place that it's constantly trampled. So that's just something to think about. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't try. It doesn't mean you shouldn't just reseed it every year, let the kids trample it during the summer, then just reseed it in the fall. That's fine. That's a fine strategy to have. Again, make the lawn so that it can be used. But there isn't any high traffic grass seed. I know they sell that in marketing and everything else, but how do you know what high traffic is? Just you tell me. High traffic to you is not high traffic. High traffic to me is the mailman walking in the lawn. That's way too high a traffic for me. That's way too high. For you, it might be 3 kids and 4 dogs. That's high traffic to you. So how do you know? That's just marketing wank when they talk about high traffic grass seed. So it's just not going to grow. But I will tell you, that dead grass that's there, you don't want to get that up now because it is still doing something for you. The first thing is some of it may come back, even though I suspect, depending how much high traffic has been there, that the crowns have been crushed and everything else. And so it may not come back, but some of it will. If there's enough root structure there, some of it may pop back up. So that's one thing. It'll come back for you. But the second thing is you have to realize that the dead grass, even though it's dead, it is still working for you because it is, number one, helping to blot out the sun. And it's also helping to keep things from getting in there. It's helping to crowd things out. Even though it's dead, If you had bare soil that's opened up allows the sun to get deeper, water to get deeper, wake things up underneath there that probably should be left to sleep. And as well as it's just physical, it's taking up physical space. Think of it like a blanket. So I would not take it out now. I would wait till the fall and then take it out and then seed. And then again, use some Scotch Patchmaster or something like that over top of it. Now, the other thing you can do if this area is large enough is you can slit seed right into it. And by the way, when you get to the fall, by the way, if you're not going to rake it out, if you're just going to do aeration overseed, dead grass that's there can actually help as a seed covering. So you may not need the Scotch Patchmaster. Dead grass that's there works great as a way to help your seed keep from washing away. Because that's the biggest thing that happens in the fall. You guys get a heavy rain and all your seed will wash down into the street. But if you have a lot of dead grass that's there, that can help. Now, too much can choke it out. But that's why you do an aeration and you triple pass it and poke more holes, right? Break some of that up. So some of that grass there is good when you do your seeding. But the other thing that you could do is you could slit seed right into it. So you could rent a slit seeder. And what that slit seeder does is it basically digs a little row and it drops the seeds into the little row or the little slit that it digs, and then that closes up around them. And you can slit seed right into that dead grass. And again, it's actually a pretty decent way to help hold things up and help retain moisture at that point. So I don't necessarily recommend getting rid of all that. I recommend trying to live with it all the way through until the end of the year and then decide on your seeding strategy. All right, y'all. Well, that's been Lawns Across America, episode 34. Hope this has brightened your day. Hope your July is going well. And I hope you have a great week ahead. Stay tuned for more. I'll see you in the lawn.
Up here, stand in line where everyone can see. Get attention and fail to mention the extent of your bad deeds. And there's a time to cry and time to let it go. And there's a meaning why it's not supposed to show. Don't you know where you belong? I will ride with you and show you all along. There's a reason you are strong. You're the one to tell the people when they're wrong. Running backwards, speaking odd words, won't amount to much. The brightest moment will shade the time spent and lift a final touch. And there's a